Live, with coverage you can count on. This is News 4 at 5.
More than 15,000 people show up in Tucson today to rally for immigration rights, and at one point the rally turned rough. Good evening, I'm Tom McNamara.
And I'm Martha Vasquez. It's being billed as a national day of action for immigration justice. From Phoenix to Philadelphia, thousands walk the streets demanding immigration reform. A large chunk gathered in downtown Tucson. Marchers met this morning at Ajo Way and 12th Avenue on the south side and walked downtown to Armory Park, where a huge crowd was already waiting. The rally, organized by the Border Action Network and other local rights groups, drew more than 15,000 people, including thousands of students who either didn't show up for class today or walked off campus. The rally protesting a congressional bill making it a felony for illegal immigrants to live or work in the United States. At one point, News 4's cameras caught a scuffle on tape. We do know that 6 people were arrested and a Tucson police officer was injured. We also know Tucson police used pepper spray gas to control the crowd. One of our own photographers caught in the crossfire had to be treated at a local hospital. Scuffle happened right after a group against illegal immigration burned 2 Mexican flags during that rally. News 4's Sandy Rathbun was there. She begins our team coverage. Sandy?
It was the second time in 2 days that members of a group called Border Guardians burned Mexican flags.
One nation, under God, indivisible.
They pledged allegiance to the American flag. Then they burned 2 Mexican flags.
We will burn every Mexican flag in America.
About 15 members of a group called Border Guardians staked out a piece of Armory Park to conduct their counter-protests.
We are not going to sit idly by, watching you invade our land.
For 2 hours, the Border Guardians made speeches, played patriotic music, and defaced Mexico's flag. They walked on it, ripped it, punched holes in it, and pretended to bullfight with it. Then they soaked it with lighter fluid and ignited it, calling it a symbol of the government of Mexico, and in their words, it's lawless people who invade the United States and then demand rights.
They have no business making foreign policy or immigration policy, and they have no business asking to be granted or demanding special rights, because they're not special.
Some threw rocks and bottles at the group. Others held signs. Both sides tried to outshout each other.
No se puede. We se puede.
Through it all, police encircled these protesters to try to protect them. Now, folks on the other side are not the only ones upset about the flag burning. Tonight, a Mexican official is also criticizing it, saying in his words, we consider any vandalism of national symbols to be unacceptable. Sandy Rathbun, News 4.
Live from Tucson, covering all of southern Arizona. This is K-Gun 9 News at 5.
Tempers flare and police move in. Tucson's immigration demonstration turns violent and K-Gun 9 News cameras are rolling. Good evening. Protests across the nation and Arizona today.
Yeah, and as you just saw, they were not all peaceful. People are pretty worked up about immigration reform, and they are not afraid to show it. We have complete team coverage tonight. K-Gun 9 News crews are here in Tucson and up in Phoenix. We begin with Mark Horner, who was there when things turned violent here in Tucson. Mark.
Jennifer, from the very beginning, it was quite evident that a lot of people wanted to keep this demonstration peaceful today, and it stayed that way for a good many hours until the flashpoint. At the center of a circle, fewer than 10 people who've come here to burn the Mexican flag.
We will burn a flag of Mexico because it's a signal, a sign of your oppression.
Outside their circle, an estimated 10,000 people who've marched here to protest immigration reform. Fearing violence, some of the marchers join hands and form a ring around the counter-protesters. They plead to their fellow protesters, asking them to leave this area inside the park. The Mexican flag is burned. Tensions escalate. Another flag is lit. The tension only rising as quickly as it burns. After a few bottles of water are hurled at some of the counter-protesters, a young woman is handcuffed. An officer throwing a quick elbow to keep a girl away. Police take the young woman to a squad car a block away. An angry crowd follows. Just as the young woman's placed inside the squad car, police go to the ground on the other side, taking down at least 2 young men.
They brought this girl out from the audience. She didn't do nothing. They're using her as an example. They brought him this way and brought the crowd and caused all this crap here. This didn't have to happen. They're using this as a stepping stone for us. These kids didn't do nothing. They arrested them for nothing. Then they beat them down. They beat them right there in front of everybody.
When we turn around, we notice several people have been hit with pepper spray, including 14-year-old Marina Estrella, a student from Safford Middle School. And no word from the Tucson Police Department just yet on just how many people were arrested here today. No word yet on their side of the story, but we expect to get that soon. TPD saying late this afternoon it will now hold a news conference about what transpired here. That news conference expected to take place hopefully before 6 o'clock, if not just afterwards. When they speak, we'll get you their words as soon as we can. Reporting live, Mark Horner, back to you.
You're watching KOLD News 13. Live, local, late breaking. This is KOLD News 13 at 5.
On this National Day of Action, demonstrators want illegal immigrants to be able to come out of the shadows. 15,000 plus protesters gathered on the streets of Tucson today. Thousands more marched through the streets of Phoenix. And yet hundreds of thousands rallied in more than 90 other cities across the country. Good evening and thank you for joining us. They walked by the hundreds of thousands. Organizers call it a campaign for immigrants' dignity.
They marched in support of rights for illegal immigrants and against proposals to classify them as criminals. In many cities, it was a sea of white. Demonstrators showing up in white shirts symbolizing peace, many carrying signs, many more waving American flags.
At one point, the Tucson protest turned violent when a different group of demonstrators set fire to a Mexican flag. There was a fight and police took some people away in handcuffs. 6 people are under arrest at this hour. We have live team coverage. KOLD News 13's Mark Stein follows Tucson's march and Teresa John reports on our schools. Let's start first with Mark, who is downtown at Armory Park.
Mandy, it was a long day and a long walk for protesters. Thousands marched 5 miles in support of fair and just immigration reform. They ended up here at Armory Park. The park is empty and the crowd is gone, but they hope their message sticks around. Thousands took to the streets.
We're coming out to march today in support of the migrant workers that are here, either legally or illegally.
Young and old, side by side, they left work and school to march for immigration reform.
They're not criminals. They're here to work, honesty, and just for a better opportunity.
I came out to fight for the rights of our Mexican people, because we just need to get rid of all these borders and let them come over if they want to work.
Demonstrators, starting at 12th and Ajo, marched 5 miles to Armory Park, downtown Tucson.
Why make criminals of 10 to 12 million people when you can open it up and say everybody is here, stay here, and register?
Once downtown, the massive group of marchers gathered around a stage to continue their protest.
Keep it peaceful, yes, keep it peaceful, turn your backs.
Just a few hundred feet away, a group called Border Guardians set up their own demonstration.
I don't believe that our government should expect me, without my permission, to aid and abet a criminal act.
In an attempt to keep the peace, trained peacekeepers linked arms to separate the protests.
The vigilantes want the attention, and our job here is to keep it peaceful so that we don't give them a reaction. That's what they want, so we're here to keep the peace.
But they did get the attention they were looking for. They burned a Mexican flag, which angered some people in the crowd. Water bottles were thrown at the Border Guardians. Police say this girl threw one of those bottles, and when she was removed from the crowd, it sparked others to demand her release. Two young men got physical with officers and were taken down and arrested. Now, once police and peacekeepers got the crowd back here to Armory Park, they gathered once again, and then once they all made it back here, the demonstration ended.
Live with coverage you can count on. This is News 4 at 6.
Thousands of demonstrators take to the streets of Tucson with a sea of signs, but not all bearing the same meaning. The National Day of Protest brings out mixed messages from a divided country and arrests by Tucson police. Thanks for joining us. I'm Tom McNamara.
And I'm Martha Vasquez. Christy Tedesco is off tonight. The far-reaching effects of immigration reform touching Tucson tonight. An estimated 15,000 people took to the streets, much higher than the 10,000 predicted. The march began at St. John's Catholic Church on the south side near Ajo and 12th Avenue when it wound its way toward Armory Park. The message? Helping 11 million illegal immigrants settle in the United States legally.
All the workers that we have working in the agricultural crops now are here for that same reason. They want the life that my father provided for me.
Well, I'm here to support the American way of life, and I think everyone deserves the opportunity to be able to do that. And part of that means taking off work in order to preserve work for others.
As Sandy Rathbun shows us, the definition of the American way of life depends on who you ask. She starts our team coverage. Sandy?
There was some violence toward the end of today's rally. Here's some pictures. Tucson police are still trying to determine exactly what happened, and at this moment we do have a News 4 crew at the police department waiting for information. But what I can tell you is at least one police officer was injured in some sort of altercation. 6 demonstrators were arrested, and Tucson police fired pepper spray into a crowd rallying around those who had been arrested. All of this happened after one of the groups at the rally burned Mexican flags, and that upset others. On one side of Armory Park, there were thousands of activists supporting illegal immigrants.
No se puede.
On the other side of the park, there were about 15 members of the anti-illegal immigration group, the Border Guardians. This group burned 2 Mexican flags, first stomping on them, then dousing them in lighter fluid and igniting them.
We will burn every Mexican flag in America.
The situation was volatile, and the Border Guardians knew it. Their director wore body armor under her shirt. Police circled the group to protect them and to ensure their right to protest. Some onlookers threw bottles and rocks and other items at these demonstrators, but police didn't tolerate it.
Okay, just like this, look the way. Excuse me.
Also trying to keep the peace, a group of volunteers from the other side who formed their own circle around police and urged troublemakers to stay away.
There's nothing to see here. Ignore the ignorant. Ignore them.
But with emotions running so high on both sides, for some, that was impossible. Sandy Rathbun, News 4.
Live from Tucson, covering all of southern Arizona. This is KGUN 9 News at 6.
Look what happened at the Tucson protest today. Just what organizers did not want.
They arrested him for nothing.
Good evening, I'm Guy Atchley.
And I'm Jennifer Waddell. It didn't take much for today's protest to turn ugly. Just take a look at what happened just a few hours ago, all caught on camera by KGUN 9.
We have live team coverage on today's protests here and in Phoenix. Let's go live to Mark Horner, who was in the middle of all the sudden trouble.
That's right here at Armory Park. You know, 6 people were arrested here today. And when things finally did get out of hand, it seemed as if the flag-burning counter-protesters got exactly what they wanted. One of them actually jumping up and down as if delighted when a young girl was taken away by police. In a sea of an estimated 10,000 people who came here to protest immigration reform, fewer than 10 others who came to burn the Mexican flag, and not just once. This is when the peaceful hours of a demonstration abruptly end. After water bottles were hurled through the air, a young woman is taken into custody. Her fellow protesters, now angry, follow her as she's led away in cuffs. A police officer throws a quick elbow to keep a girl from getting too close. As the young woman's placed inside a patrol car, there's more trouble just on the other side of that car.
They brought this girl out from the audience. She didn't do nothing. They're using her as an example. They brought him this way and brought the crowd and caused all this crap here. This didn't have to happen. They're using this as a stepping stone for us. These kids didn't do nothing. They arrested them for nothing. Then they beat them down. They beat them right there in front of everybody. They didn't do nothing.
What is your name, sir?
My name's Robert Hernandez, and I'm proud to be an American.
Police used their pepper spray. Young men feeling the sting. And 14-year-old Marina Estrella, a student at Safford Middle School. Back at the park, police work to maintain order.
And you know, we've been out here all day. We watched the march actually start over at 12th and Ajo, then came here right away, and we were here when the marchers arrived. And I can tell you that the real shame in this story is that so many people tried so hard to keep this day a peaceful one. No matter what side of the issue you fall on, this very sensitive and highly charged issue, everybody I think would agree that there was a lot of effort to keep this event peaceful. And late in the day, unfortunately, it didn't stay that way. Reporting live, Mark Warner, KGUN 9 News.
We do have team coverage on all angles. As you might have seen in Mark's story, there were a lot of Tucson police officers on the scene. We do want to bring you now the law enforcement side of this story. TPD just held a news conference, and we just got this into the KGUN 9 newsroom. We want to let you listen in.
And there was an individual who threw a bottle, in fact, at the individual burning the Mexican flag. That's when officers moved in to effect an arrest and get that person out of there as quickly as possible. That was necessary because of the tensions that were starting to erupt at that time with the burning of the flag. We decided that at that point it was time to get that person into custody and get them out of there. There was a subsequent burning and tensions started to get even higher, and when an individual came up and tried to douse the individual with water, the individual that was burning the flag in the second instance, and that individual was also arrested. The officers were escorting the second arrestee to a site that was approximately a block away from the park. And there was a certain faction of the group that had gathered there that followed them almost that block, and the situation became more volatile when they got to the point of putting that young lady into custody and putting her in a patrol car. And several officers were attacked by members of the crowd, and we had a couple of officers that were injured, and several other individuals were then taken into custody.
You're watching KOLD News 13, live, local, late breaking. This is KOLD News 13 at 6.
Why make criminals of 10 to 12 million people when you can open it up and say everybody is here, stay here, and register?
The debate over immigration reform returns to the streets of Tucson. Thousands of people march against hardline legislation. Among them, hundreds of students who cut class despite warnings. Many thousands more people converge on the state capitol in Phoenix as Arizona joins the nation in a day of protest. Good evening, everyone. Organizers of today's immigration march in Tucson expected 10,000 people to hit the streets.
They were wrong. Tucson police estimate 15,000 people walked from the south side to Armory Park downtown to protest federal legislation that would make illegal immigration a felony and punish groups that give humanitarian aid to repeat border crossers. In contrast to last month's student-driven protests, today's walk was highly organized. Many marchers wore white as a symbol of peace and carried American flags. But there were arrests after counter-protesters burned a Mexican flag. KOLD News 13 has team coverage beginning with Mark Stein live at Armory Park. Mark?
Chris, they marched, they protested, and rallied for immigration reform. Thousands of people took part here in Tucson, and they ended up right here at Armory Park. The protesters marched 5 miles all the way from 12th and Ajo through the streets in Tucson. The whole day, the crowd chanting and holding signs high, some Mexican flags, but many more American flags flew over the masses. Once they made it here to the park, the demonstrators gathered around a stage and continued their protest.
I came out to fight for the rights of our Mexican people, because we just need to get rid of all these borders and let them come over if they want to work.
Because they're not criminals. They're here to work, honesty, and just for a better opportunity.
It was a peaceful demonstration until a group called Border Guardians burned a Mexican flag in the park. That's when some people in the crowd got angry and started throwing water bottles. Police tried to remove some of the people throwing bottles. That sparked others to demand their release. 2 young men got physical with officers and were taken down and arrested. Now, the Tucson Police Department tells us that 6 people in all were arrested here at Armory Park today. A rather sad ending for what was the whole day a peaceful protest. Reporting live downtown, Mark Stein, KOLD News 13.
All right, thank you, Mark.
Thousands take to the streets of Arizona to protest proposed immigration reforms. In Phoenix, tens of thousands marched to the state capitol. In Tucson, a march from the south side to Armory Park is peaceful, but there, some of the marchers clashed with Mexican flag burners. Violence breaks out and 6 people are arrested, and tonight, Tucson police are defending their actions. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm Heather Moore. At issue